Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Between the Lanes. And Dad and I are excited to have you back. Aren't you excited, Dad?
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming back.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, everybody. We're enjoying this, and I hope you're enjoying it too. Covering lots of great topics. And today we're covering one that's probably going to go a little deep, and we're going to jump right into it. And it's the idea of dealing with rejection and dealing with an orphan spirit. And that's kind of a big topic. Dad, give kind of a little bit more background and perspective about those.
Yeah, I think it's really, it can't be overstated, the significance of our upbringing and the impact of things that have developed our life on our leadership. One of the responsibilities of parenting is to give us a proper image, give our children, a proper image of God's love, His plans, His nurturing care for their life. And when that's absent, or when it's abusive, or when it happens in a dominating way, so we say rejection. Well, if the essence of who you are was rejected as in your development, it forms the way you respond to circumstances in life.
Situations.
So I think this topic, you might say, well, this is kind of personal. Well, we don't mean it to be in your face, but we do mean it to be, this will be a lid, a barrier to your leadership.
Yep.
If you don't think about it and address it and respond.
Well, when you join into the family of God, that's what you are. You're joining into a family. And so people who come from a family that is healthy or functional in some kind of way, understanding the family of God has a different perspective. It's maybe even easier to understand our Heavenly Father through an appropriate lens of fathering and what family looks like, even accountability that happens within a family, all the things that make family healthy for those who have experienced it, but those who haven't, it absolutely frames their perspective of family. And potentially that family is damaging, family is hurtful, you can't trust family. A father perspective that says my father was abusive, an over-disciplinarian, all of those things that contribute to a perspective that affects my faith. And because my faith may be core to who I am, and is core to who I am, actually will have an outflow from how I then interact with people.
Yeah, and to some people, it would be a little, what would seem insignificant. It's kind of like, get over it. You know, that's, everybody experiences that to something that is hugely significant. Let me give you just an example of something like this. So I was doing pre-marriage counseling with a young couple in their early 20s, and they came in for a session, counseling session, and the fiance, the lady, came in first. So we were just chit-chatting, waiting for her fiance to join the meeting. And when he came to the meeting, he looked at his watch and he go, "Oh, hey, this is we need to celebrate today. This today marks the longest I've ever been in any job in my whole life." And I thought to myself, that's probably something we need to unpack.
We need to talk about. Yeah.
And so I waited. We didn't do it in that session, but I waited until I had a one-on-one session with him. And I went back to that and I said, "Hey, you mentioned that the longest you've ever been in any job in your life, and you're in your early 20s. I realize you're just sort of early on in your career, but why was that? Why haven't you not been able to hold a job longer than a year?" And he goes, "I don't know." Like that. I don't know. It's just the way it is. And I said, "Well, so tell me about your dad. Tell me about your growing up." And he goes, "What?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, is there a situation that you can remember that impacted you?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, there's a this comes to my mind. He said, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, my dad was a car guy. Loved to. We had a detached garage, and he would love to, work on cars in the garage. And so one night we had dinner, and he left the dinner table to go work on his car in the garage, or a car in the garage, and so I followed him. My dad was already under the car doing some stuff, and he goes, "Hey son, go to the workbench and get me such and such tool." And he said, I didn't know what the tool was, but he said, I went over and I guessed, and I walked it back, handed it to my dad under the car, and he took a look at the tool and threw it across the garage floor. And he said, if that's all you know about tools, get out of my garage, go back to the kitchen and where you belong with your mama. And I said, really? That, and I thought instantly, so this is a tape that plays over and over in your mind when you get into a work situation that's new, something you haven't encountered, something that all of a sudden you may fail.
Yeah.
Go back in the kitchen where you belong
Yeah.
with your mama.
Yeah.
You think, well, how are these two connected?
Yeah.
They're connected in a experience that has now impacted you as an adult and your work career.
Yeah. Seeing that, I have a friend who had a very strained relationship with his dad. And the reality of what that looked like for him is constantly running. And the image I have in my mind with the orphan spirit or rejection is sort of no stability. Nothing you're looking to grab hold of something, and I don't have solid footing. I don't have something to hold on to that keeps me solid and stable. And so what that means is I'm constantly grabbing, I'm constantly looking. And that's what this guy would do in the middle of a relationship. And I'm not talking just like a friendship. When that began to feel a little unstable, he didn't know what to do. So he would run, and suddenly he'd be gone. Nobody could find him. And you're going, man, what's the deal here? Well, come to find out, that's what he did when his father would be unstable. And so what he had to do is he had to look he would try to go somewhere where he could find stability that caused him to be running and looking and searching. And so when we find ourselves, if you find yourself at a place of going, man, why do I keep running? The real question to ask is, well, what are you looking for? What hole are you trying to fill?
Yep.
Because that's what rejection and an orphan spirit is. There's a hole that's there right in our heart, and we're looking for a way to fill it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I think of, I know I have some friends, a couple of friends who were orphaned. They grew up in an orphanage. And when you're an orphan, what it really means is you don't have anybody that really provides for you or cares for your needs. And so you grow up thinking, I got to take care of myself. I got to watch out for myself. And when it comes to food, it's like, I'm going to protect everything I got because I may not have enough for my next meal. I'm going to take this thing and hide it away so you can't get it because I may not have it.
Yeah.
And when you grow up with that mentality, it begins to impact and reflect on who you are as an adult. And if you're skilled or talented and you're placed into a position of leadership, but you have that mentality, it's like, no, I'm not going to share anything with you. No, I'm not going to give you credit for something that, because I may not have enough.
Yeah.
And it's just overwhelming.
How do you work for someone, or maybe you're a child who actually has a parent who went through it, they're present now, but they struggle with an orphan spirit as a parent, and now the child is dealing with a parent who has an orphan spirit, or you're in a job where your boss has an orphan spirit. How do you interact and relate to someone who has an orphan spirit when you're under their leadership?
Yeah, when you're under their leadership, I think the most important thing you can do is pray, because it's been my experience that when we come out of that in childhood into adulthood, we don't make this association, and because we don't make the association, if you even said, well, I think maybe you might be struggling with an orphan spirit. They'd go, what?
Hmm.
Shut up and get out of my face. I mean,
There's your first sign that you might have an orphan spirit. If that's your response.
denial. Yeah, denial is, and so pray that God will encounter, reveal His great love, because the only one, no parent is perfect. So to some degree, every one of us has a parental wound, a mother that was too dominating, or a father that was detached or distant, even if they were present in the home, and much worse. I used to think that, everybody's experience. I grew up with my parents married 40 years, loving. I grew up and I assumed everybody had that experience. And over my pastoral ministry, what I found is the majority of people don't have that experience.
Yeah.
And what happens when we have a bad experience is we make an inner vow. I'll never be like that. And when you make an inner vow, it takes you to an extreme. You either will replicate what you said you'd never be, or you'll never get even close to it. Yeah. So you have to acknowledge. So if you're the person now, I suppose if you see it, let me say this. If you see it in your boss and you're praying for him, you could say, Lord, I just pray that you would bring healing to the inner vows of his life, of his childhood, that you'd enable him to experience the joy of compassion and, kindness and, selflessness. But not only is it an inner vow, it's a judgment. It's a judgment that says people like that are always like that. And they're, and that judgment makes us as adults and leaders harsh.
Yeah.
And then inner vow, a judgment, or a hurt. If you think back, or you know of a situation, and you just say to your boss, you're friendly enough that you say, hey, I know when you were passed over for that promotion, it was hurtful. I mean, are you okay? And your boss says, no, I'm fine. No, it's no big deal. No, in fact, I've started looking for other opportunities,
Yeah.
Pray.
A lot of people who have struggled with rejection and that orphan spirit end up being big time drivers, actually accomplish a lot of things. We've talked about Coach Prime in one of the other episodes, but let's keep our focus on him because he's so fascinating in the season. But one of the things that he talked about is growing up, and here's this incredible athlete, Deion Sanders. And he said, nobody came to my games. I didn't have family. Nobody showed up to support me. And he said, so as opposed to being motivated because I wanted to impress somebody, I wanted my family to be proud of me, I had to make up a scenario that would drive me.
Yep.
I had to make up my motivation to where I didn't care what anybody thought because there was nobody supporting me. It had to simply be me. And there's a great motivation that a lot of people who've done successful things find that motivation out of that place of rejection and hurt.
It's true. And so there's a part of that. So in his case, it appears to have a good effect.
Yeah,
right. He said,
and he clearly has found God,
right,
which had clearly a big part in his life.
Exactly. He's taking out of that hurt, and he's saying, if you had one of these, I'm gonna help you recover from that. I'm gonna expect good things, but I'm gonna help you recover.
Yeah, right. And clearly, he's made God a part of that healing, and using it to find a place of purpose. And so, I think people that I've seen who have overcome an orphan spirit or overcome that area of rejection, it's kind of like we've talked in previous ones about addiction. People have to know they're an addict, and so it prevents them from doing certain activities because they know they have a propensity or a tendency. I think people who have worked through an orphan spirit have to understand and know that there is a propensity in them to escape, to run away, and knowing that, causes them to surround themselves with people who can remind them, hey, you're in family, hey, you're loved, and eventually can fully overcome it. But there's something that's a part of the regular reminder of if left to my own devices, I'm bent to go this way.
Yeah. And maybe if you think about a hurt, maybe the hurt didn't happen in your family, but nevertheless, it was something that happened in your life. I remember when I was in fifth grade, uh, we had recess, and at recess, the fifth graders would play keep away with a playground ball from the sixth graders. And one particular day, I being in fifth grade, the fifth graders had the ball, and I was a big kid in fifth grade, one of the biggest in the grade, and so I was given the ball to hold on to it, so we would have it to begin the next.
Oh yeah,
Game
over then.
Yeah,
you
so
got
I had it all wrapped up. Well, the sixth graders were pawing at me and trying to pull it away, and I was afraid that I would disappoint my fifth grade buddies and I would lose the ball. And I just started thrashing around, sobbing, crying, like this. And the bell rang. And the sixth graders called me a baby, crybaby. And I remember saying in response to that, nobody will ever call me a crybaby again. I will never, and I mean, I made that statement, but I never really thought of it as I grew into my, high school and adult years. But then I get married, and your mom, my wife, is saying she knows the situation was difficult, and it was emotional, and yet I had no emotions. And she said, how'd that make you feel? And my response was, I don't know, and I don't care. It doesn't make any difference. It was, I lived out of my hurt. I lived in denial. And that hurt impacted me as an adult. And so you say as a leader, well, I just don't have that much emotions. I'm not that compassionate. Let me talk to you about your childhood. Let me talk to you about a hurt that you may have experienced.
Man, how much, all of us right now, if you're tuning in, you can go back to a moment in your childhood that defined and shaped your life. And so it's like these moments where we've all experienced rejection. Maybe it's not as what I would maybe even say deep as like an orphan spirit or abandoned by a father or mother or that kind of hurt, but there's some aspect of a hurt and rejection. And it's like you're going down this path of life and that rejection happens. It's like a marker.
Yep.
It marks your soul. The question is, does it become it's a pivot moment?
Mm-hmm.
And do I continue to follow that pain of rejection, or do I go, God, how do I submit this to you? Now, we're talking like looking back in hindsight. And so I can see how God can work and he can recover. But even maybe right now you're dealing with something you've been rejected in. The question is, God, what way are you pivoting me from this moment? That it can be a pivotal moment, but it becomes one that doesn't cause me to continue down a place of pain and rejection, but causes me to continue down a place of submitting it to you and overcoming by your power.
Yeah, and in my case, it became a diligent exercise. So God gave me a beautiful wife to help me get in touch with this pain that I had buried and denied, and was keeping me from being able to really express things properly. And when I became aware of it, what I had to do is when she said, so how did that make you feel? My natural reaction out of the hurt was, I don't know. I buried it. I don't know. But I began to say, let me think about that. I had to dig through the hurt and the response I made to that hurt to really say, you know what? This is the way it made me feel. It made me feel rejected. It made me feel embarrassed. Did you want to cry? Yeah, I think I did want to cry, but I stopped myself. Well, don't stop yourself. Crying is a means of purging the pain that has been inflicted on your life. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you, but I had to, it became a intentional effort in order to overcome
Yeah.
and not let it impact my life.
It's kind of like where you can tell that we've got some kind of guard over an area of our life when asked about it, we become highly defensive. And you can know that now I'm beginning to identify this area. And so, because we're all, to some degree, we have blind spots. There's areas of our life where we're not self-aware. And so maybe, I've seen people who struggle with rejection, but they've covered over it so much in their heart, they don't even recognize it anymore. That the way in which they're reacting is stemming from a source of rejection in their life. And so part of what you have to be, you can identify it if one of the questions is, so how do I overcome this? How do I even know? It's being open and willing to listen to feedback. Someone to ask you a question that when you feel it rise up in you, you take that thought that's risen up in your spirit and go, wait, why did I just think that?
Yeah.
Why did I become so defensive? Why? Those questions really help get to a place that can help pull the sort of the mask that's covering that area of our life and pull it away.
Yeah, and it's not always you that can ask the why.
Right.
It's someone that's close to you, someone that's safe, someone that loves you.
Yep.
A good counselor can be that if you don't have someone, but it may be your spouse. I think for me as a man, Jan has a tender, nurturing sensitivity that I don't have. And I can look at it and say, well, that's just difference between men and women, maybe, partly. But it also could be because she didn't make responses in her life like I made in my life.
Yeah.
And she's helping me get in touch with something that I really need to be in touch with.
Yeah. So, as we wrap this up, the place of dealing with rejection and hurt in an orphan spirit, again, if you're struggling with this in this day, it's really a very simple process. Now, it doesn't mean it's not going to be a journey and take time, but first it's being able to submit it to the Lord and go, okay, God, I recognize I can go right now. I even challenge you, if you're listening, you're watching, take a moment and just go, God, was there something that happened at some point in my life? In my childhood, could have been in, maybe adult years, but this happened. And I recognize so much of how I react and respond in situations goes back to that moment. And it created an insecurity, it created a fear, it created an anxiety that is present in my life and causes me to react in all these situations. And today, right now, God, I'm going to submit that to you. I'm going to get that. I'm going to confess it, because as I confess it, I begin to be made well.
So good.
And be made whole. So just want to encourage you in that today, because you can walk in strength. You can walk in joy. You can walk in deliverance. That can happen today. It can happen in this moment. And so as a parent, maybe as a child, as a leader, as a believer, let God do that work in your life today. Let him overcome rejection and watch him be the source of fulfillment and all the courageous moments that you need to move past those points of pain in your life. Dad, you want to wrap it up and then pray us out?
Yeah, one more thought that comes to me in this, and the Bible term is the word iniquity. It's a bent in a certain direction, and Exodus chapter 20 says that God visits the iniquities of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. Well, so let me put it in more normal vernacular. If there is a tendency in your family, maybe it's a tendency toward anger or addiction, or there's a tendency, abuse of some kind, and you can see it in a multi-generational pattern. It's impacting your life today, not because necessarily of anything we've talked about. It's not a hurt that you hold or a vow that you've made. It's something that you've inherited from your grandfather, from your father, from abuse was multi-generational, and now you struggle with that issue. One of the ways that you can sort of identify these issues is if you're married, when it's easy to see it in somebody else. So your spouse says, "Oh, that's your dad right there." That oh, your mom just spoke in that such. Now you're talking about iniquities, and God says that if we will turn our lives to Him, He'll actually deliver us from those iniquities and bless us to 1,000 generations. Well, it's worth contending for. It's worth the effort that we're making in order to, not only respond to the iniquities, not only respond to the inner vows and the hurts and judgments we've made, but to the iniquities that maybe have been a part of our family. Yeah. So I want to pray for that as well.
Great.
Lord, I pray today that you would be the delivery system, that you would be speaking to people through this podcast. And Lord, that you'd make the connection in their leading, in their parenting, in their personal life, that the hurts, the rejection they've felt, the feeling that they have that they're responsible for themselves. Nobody else is going to take care of them. Lord, would you just reveal yourself in a deep and special way to show them your love knows no bounds, and you are the one who provides every one of our needs. And so would you do that today? Would you just extend yourself into these situations and bring healing and restoration into our life as only you can do? In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. You are loved. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
You got to be cool. You can make it happen, Captain, but remember, you got to be